$1,600 a month, every month, while my brother, her golden child, contributed nothing but chaos and a lazy girlfriend. I fixed their house, paid their bills, endured the sneers. But the moment I learned of her ultimate deception, the will, and heard her venomous truth, the illusion of family shattered. It was time the free ride ended, permanently. Even now, years later, I, Almira, can still picture myself at 7 years old, hands caked in rich, dark soil, helping Dad in our sprawling Portland, Oregon garden. Saturdays were our sacred ritual, a symphony of his booming laughter and the rhythmic snip of shears as he coaxed vibrant life from stubborn rose bushes and sprawling tomato vines. He'd call me his little sprout, and those sun-drenched mornings, filled with the earthy perfume of freshly turned dirt and the sweet scent of blooming petunias, were the very bedrock of my world. That vibrant world, however, shattered one crisp autumn morning. A heart attack, swift and utterly merciless, stole him away, leaving an echoing hollow silence that no 7-year-old should ever have to comprehend. The garden lay fallow for what felt like an eternity. My mother, Susan, eventually found solace, and then love, with David. He was a high school history teacher, a man of quiet kindness with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach the crinkles Dad's had. But he tried, genuinely tried, to fill the immense void. Within a year, they were married. Then, not long after, came the news that would subtly, yet irrevocably, alter our small family dynamic. Mom was pregnant. The anticipation for my new sibling filled our small house, a tangible hum of excitement. Leo's arrival was met with a focused, almost desperate joy from Mom, a kind of happiness I hadn't seen in her since before Dad left us, and I watched, a silent observer, as her world began to tilt, ever so slightly, towards him. The tilt became a pronounced lean, then an undeniable gravitational pull. With Leo's arrival, Susan's attention, once a warm, encompassing blanket, now seemed to shrink, focusing almost entirely on her son. She quit her part-time job at the local library, declaring that Leo needed her full-time presence during his crucial formative years. I wanted to ask if my own formative years hadn't been crucial too, especially after losing Dad. But the words always caught in my throat, a tight knot of unspoken longing. School events, like my third-grade art show where my clay giraffe won a blue ribbon, or the spring concert where I nervously sang a solo, often saw an empty seat where Mom was supposed to be. "Oh, Almira, honey, Leo had a bit of a sniffle, and I couldn't possibly leave him," she'd say later, her voice already drifting as she'd turn back to coo at him. David, bless his heart, noticed. I'd catch him watching Susan with a furrowed brow as she fussed over Leo, completely oblivious to my attempts to share a story from my day. He tried, on several occasions, to gently broach the subject with her. I'd overhear snippets from the kitchen, his calm, reasoned voice met with her increasingly defensive, sometimes tearful, rebuttals about how Leo is just so sensitive, or you don't understand what it's like. He never won those arguments. Instead, David became my quiet champion, the one who'd meticulously frame my drawings and hang them in his study, who'd take me to the Portland Art Museum on quiet Sunday afternoons, his gentle commentary on brushstrokes and color palettes, a soothing balm to my often ignored existence. As Leo grew, Susan's protectiveness solidified into an impenetrable fortress around him. When he showed a fleeting interest in joining the school's swim team in 4th grade, her reaction was swift and absolute. "The chlorine is too harsh for his delicate skin," she'd declared. "And what if he catches a chill?" Or worse, cramps up in the deep end. All his pleas and even David's gentle reassurances about lifeguards and proper training fell on deaf ears. Leo, quick to learn which battles were easily won, soon lost interest anyway. Meanwhile, David quietly encouraged my own pursuits. He saw my knack for argumentation during our dinner table discussions and suggested I join the middle school debate club. He'd help me research topics, listen to me practice my speeches in the living room, his pride a quiet, steady glow when I brought home a small trophy from a local tournament. This stark contrast in parenting only amplified Leo's burgeoning sense of entitlement. His room became a chaotic landscape of discarded toys, half-eaten snacks, and unlaundered clothes. More often than not, Susan would turn to me with a sigh. "Almira, dear, could you just tidy up Leo's room? He's got so much on his mind with his... well, he's just busy." The unspoken addendum was always that I, being older and more capable, should naturally shoulder the responsibility. David would sometimes try to intervene, suggesting Leo needed to learn to clean up after himself, but Susan would invariably counter with a pained expression, murmuring about how Leo was too creative to be bothered with such mundane tasks, or how I was so good at organizing. David, outnumbered and clearly unwilling to cause a larger rift, would eventually retreat, a look of quiet resignation on his face. High school graduation felt like a threshold, a doorway to a life I could finally shape for myself. David beamed from the audience, his applause the loudest, his pride a palpable warmth that wrapped around me even from a distance. Susan was there, of course, though her attention seemed to flit between the stage and her phone, probably checking in on Leo, who, at 13, had deemed a high school graduation too boring to attend. Later that evening, David called me into his study, the scent of old books and his pipe tobacco a familiar comfort. He pulled out a worn manila folder. "I've been putting a little aside, Almira," he said, his voice thick with emotion, as he spread out brochures for the graphic design program at Arizona State University in Tempe. "It's not a fortune, but it's a start. You deserve to chase your dreams." Tears welled in my eyes, a mixture of gratitude and relief. Before I could articulate my thanks, Susan appeared in the doorway, her expression tightening as she took in the scene. "David, surely that money should be kept for Leo's future," she interjected, her tone sharp. "He's going to need every advantage he can get." A familiar weariness settled on David's face, but for once, a steely resolve replaced it. "This is non-negotiable, Susan," he stated, his voice firm. "Almira is going to college." The move to Tempe was a breath of fresh air, a liberating escape. My weekly calls home, however, were often tinged with David's growing concern. "Leo's? Well, he's struggling, Almira," he'd confide, his voice heavy. "He's fallen in with a rough crowd, skipping classes. Susan just keeps saying he's misunderstood, that his teachers don't appreciate his unique spirit." The familiar excuses, now relayed with a father's palpable pain, painted a bleak picture of the path my brother was choosing, or rather the one being paved for him. The Arizona sun seemed to fuel my ambition. I thrived in the creative environment at Arizona State University, pouring myself into my design projects. After graduation, I landed a coveted junior designer position at a prestigious advertising agency in San Francisco, a city buzzing with energy matching my own drive. The initial years were a blur of late nights, endless revisions, and the exhilarating feeling of seeing my work come to life on billboards and in glossy magazines. Slowly, meticulously, I saved brown bagging lunches and opting for thrift store finds over trendy boutiques, until finally, at 26, I signed the lease on a small studio apartment in a decent neighborhood, a tiny slice of the city, entirely my own. Meanwhile, back in Portland, Leo's trajectory continued its downward spiral. He had dropped out of community college after a single semester, citing uninspired instructors and a lack of intellectual stimulation. His days, from what I gathered during my increasingly infrequent calls, were spent glued to various screens, fueled by Susan's unwavering belief that he was on the cusp of some brilliant, yet-to-be-defined breakthrough. "He is just exploring his options, Almira," she would insist. "He is too intelligent for a 9-to-5 grind." When I invited them to my small housewarming, only David made the 600-mile drive. He brought a potted orchid and a bottle of surprisingly good wine, his smile tinged with a familiar sadness. Over lasagna, my attempt at his favorite dish, he confessed, "I tried to get Leo an internship at a friend's print shop, just something to get him started. He said the hours were too early and the work beneath him." Susan agreed, of course, said his talents would be wasted there. The resignation in David's voice was heavier than I had ever heard it, a quiet acknowledgement of a battle he knew he was losing, not just with Leo, but with Susan's unyielding, blinding devotion. The call came on a Tuesday morning, shattering the mundane rhythm of a work week. David had collapsed while grading papers, a massive stroke. By the time I frantically booked a flight and rushed to Portland, it was too late. The funeral was a surreal blur. Susan was a portrait of theatrical grief, her sobs echoing through the small chapel, regaling anyone who would listen with tales of their perfect, loving marriage. I watched her performance, a knot of complicated emotions tightening in my chest. Her sorrow, I suspected, was less for the man she had lost and more for the financial security that had vanished with him. David had been their sole, steady income. Leo, true to form, seemed mostly detached, his attention more on his phone than the eulogies. The months that followed were a grim testament to Susan's inability to cope. The carefully managed household finances David had maintained quickly unraveled. Desperate calls started coming, first for help with the mortgage, then the utilities. Reluctantly, I set up an automatic monthly transfer of $1,600, a significant portion of my San Francisco salary. Then came the call about the leaking roof, so I wired more money for repairs. Not long after, Susan threw out her back and could not manage the housework, so I arranged and paid for a part-time cleaning service. During one of my increasingly strained visits, I found a new addition to the household. Jessica, Leo's latest girlfriend, a young woman with an air of bored entitlement and an expensive-looking handbag, who had apparently moved in. She barely acknowledged my presence, her eyes glued to her phone, already making herself very much at home in the house David had worked so hard to maintain. Each visit back to the Portland house felt like stepping into a slowly decaying diorama of my past, now overlaid with a veneer of neglect and unwelcome new inhabitants. The garden David had lovingly tended was overgrown with weeds, its vibrant colors muted by neglect. Inside, the once cozy atmosphere was choked with a subtle layer of grime, a testament to Jessica's apparent aversion to domestic chores and Susan's increasing apathy. During one particularly tense weekend visit, I arrived to find the kitchen overflowing with dirty dishes and takeout containers. Jessica was lounging on the sofa, idly scrolling through her phone, a half-eaten bag of chips beside her. My patience, already worn thin by months of financial contributions and emotional strain, finally snapped. "You know, Jessica," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You live here rent-free, eating food that I largely pay for. The least you could do is wash a dish. She looked up slowly, a smirk playing on her lips. Who do you think you are, waltzing in here giving orders? This is not your house anymore. Before I could retort, she delivered the final, crushing blow, her voice dripping with a smug triumph. Oh, honey, you have got it all wrong. Susan signed everything over to Leo ages ago. The house, whatever little savings David left, it is all his. There is a will and everything. I saw it myself when I was looking for a stamp in her desk. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. Turning, I found Susan in the dining room, meticulously clipping coupons she would likely never use, her face a mask of feigned obliviousness. Mom, I began, my voice barely a whisper. Is it true? Did you really make a will leaving everything to Leo? Susan continued to fuss with her coupons for a long moment, the snip, snip, snip of her scissors the only sound in the suffocating silence. She would not meet my gaze. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, her shoulders straightened, and a hard, unfamiliar resolve settled onto her features. Yes, Almira, she said, her voice flat, devoid of any emotion. It is true. The simple affirmation struck me with the force of a physical blow. I do not understand, I managed, the words feeling thick and foreign in my mouth. I am the one helping you. I am the one sending $1,600 every single month. Leo does not work. He does not contribute a single dime. How could you? Her head snapped up. Her eyes, usually soft and a little vague, now glinted with a defensive fire. Do not you dare talk about your brother that way, she admonished, her voice rising to that familiar, shrill pitch I knew preceded a lengthy defense of Leo. You do not understand him. You never have. Understand what, Mom? I pressed, a desperate anger finally bubbling to the surface. That he is a parasite, content to live off my money while his girlfriend trashes our home. David's home. Her face twisted into an expression I had never seen before, a chilling mixture of resentment and something akin to disdain. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Almira, she spat. You want to know the truth? Leo needs me. He has always needed me in a way you never did. You were always so independent, so capable. He is sensitive. He is different. And frankly, her voice dropped, delivering the final, fatal wound. He needs this security. You will be fine. You always are. Perhaps it is best if you just let us manage on our own now. The implication was clear. I was dismissed. My utility had ended. The drive back to San Francisco was a blur of numb disbelief and a deep, aching sorrow. I walked out of that house, the one filled with so many fractured memories, and did not look back. The first thing I did upon returning to my small studio apartment was cancel the automatic $1,600 monthly transfer to Susan's account. The silence from Portland lasted exactly 1 month. Then the calls began. Almira, the money did not come through. Susan's voice, querulous and demanding, came through the line without preamble. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, Mom, I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I stopped the payments. What followed was an explosion of accusations, guilt-tripping, and demands. Leo joined in, his texts filled with misspelled threats and pronouncements of how I was destroying the family. Jessica, surprisingly, even tried to connect with me on LinkedIn, sending a saccharine message about how I was breaking Susan's poor, fragile heart, and how Leo was too stressed to handle this. I blocked their numbers, their social media profiles, every avenue of communication I could find. The first few weeks were difficult, a strange mix of liberation and a lingering, conditioned guilt. But with each passing day, the weight on my shoulders lessened. 6 months later, the silence from Portland remains. I do not know how they are managing, and for the first time in my adult life, I do not feel responsible for it. The $1,600 now goes into my own investment account, a tangible symbol of my reclaimed future. I sleep through the night, undisturbed by angry messages or tearful, manipulative calls. Sometimes I think of David, and I believe, truly believe, he would understand. He would be proud. My journey, though painful, has taught me profound lessons I hope can offer some insight. It underscored for me the critical importance of self-worth and the courage it takes to establish healthy boundaries, even with my own mother. I learned that unconditional sacrifice in a toxic dynamic only perpetuates harm to oneself. My story, I feel, is a stark reminder to recognize and disengage from emotional manipulation, the constant excuses for Leo, the guilt-tripping. I see now how these were tactics. Escaping such relationships was vital for my mental and emotional well-being. Furthermore, my commitment to my career and achieving financial independence ultimately gave me the power to choose freedom, a powerful realization that economic self-sufficiency can be a key to liberation. Perhaps the most poignant takeaway for me is that not all blood relationships are inherently nurturing or deserving of endless compromise. Sometimes, severing ties, however agonizing it was, became the most profound act of self-love, paving my way to genuine peace. Healing from such an ordeal has taken time and unwavering resolve, but I discovered that steadfastness in my difficult but correct decision ultimately led to true serenity. What are your thoughts on my final choice? Could I have handled it differently? Have you ever faced similar family dynamics or toxic relationships? Share your experiences and insights in the comments below. I believe this can be a space for mutual support and learning. If my story resonated with you, please share it with others who might benefit, and subscribe for more impactful life stories. Remember, you are not alone, and a path to peace is always possible.